Welcome to True Crime Stories. I'm the Archivist, and this is where we open the case, turn the page, and dive into the darkness of history's most compelling mysteries. Welcome to the case of the Menendez brothers. August 20th, 1989. Beverly Hills, California. The Menendez mansion stood as a testament to the American dream. A sprawling estate worth millions. Home to entertainment executive Jose Menendez and his wife Mary Louise, known as Kitty. But behind the facade of wealth and success lurked secrets so dark that they would explode into violence on this summer night. Jose and Kitty Menendez were found brutally murdered in their own living room, victims of multiple shotgun blasts at close range. The killers? Their own sons, Lyle and Erik Menendez. Today, 36 years later, the brothers who shocked America are making headlines once again. In August 2025, both were denied parole in their first hearings in decades. Their fight for freedom continues. But the question remains, do they deserve it? The Menendez family appeared to have it all. Jose Menendez, 51, was a powerful executive at Live Entertainment, formerly known as Caraco Pictures. He had built a fortune and established his family in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in America. Kitty, 47, was a former beauty queen who had dedicated her life to raising their two sons. But on that August evening, this picture-perfect family would be shattered forever. At approximately 10 p.m., neighbors heard what sounded like firecrackers, but were actually the echoes of 12-gauge shotgun blasts. Jose was shot 6 times, including a contact wound to the back of his head that was so devastating it nearly decapitated him. Kitty was shot 10 times as she tried to crawl away from her attackers. When police arrived, they found a scene of unimaginable brutality. The living room was soaked in blood, shotgun shells scattered across the expensive Persian rugs. Initially, investigators suspected organized crime, perhaps a business deal gone wrong, but then came a phone call that would change everything. At 11:47 p.m., Lyle Menendez, then 21, called 911 in apparent hysteria. "Someone killed our parents." The brothers claimed they had been at a movie theater watching Batman when the murders occurred. They said they returned home to find their parents dead. In the immediate aftermath, Lyle and Erik appeared to be grieving sons. They cooperated with police, attended their parents' funeral, and seemed devastated by their loss. But then, their behavior began to raise eyebrows. Just days after the funeral, the brothers embarked on what prosecutors would later call an orgy of spending. Erik purchased a new Jeep Wrangler, while bought 3 expensive Rolex watches. They rented a penthouse in Marina del Rey, hired full-time bodyguards, and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on clothes, jewelry, and travel. In the months following their parents' deaths, the brothers spent nearly $700,000. Erik even hired a professional tennis coach, believing he could go pro. The spending spree continued for 6 months until police attention turned to the most unlikely suspects, the victims' own children. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Erik had been seeing a psychologist, Dr. Jerome Oziel, and during their sessions, he had made shocking confessions. When Oziel's mistress came forward with information about those sessions, the investigation took a dramatic turn. On March 8, 1990, while Menendez was arrested, Erik, who was playing tennis in Israel, surrendered to authorities 3 days later. The motive, according to prosecutors, was simple: greed. The brothers stood to inherit their parents' $14 million estate. But the defense would tell a very different story, one that would captivate and divide America. The first trial began in July 1993, and from the opening statements, it was clear this would be unlike any murder case America had ever seen. The prosecution, led by Pamela Bozanik, painted a picture of 2 spoiled and entitled young men who killed their parents for money. The evidence seemed overwhelming. The brothers had purchased shotguns just days before the murders. They had lied about their whereabouts, and their extravagant spending afterward showed a clear motive. But the defense, led by Leslie Abramson, presented a shocking counter-narrative that would change the course of the trial and public opinion. The abuse allegations were graphic and detailed. Erik testified that his father began sexually abusing him when he was just 6 years old, and that the abuse continued until just weeks before the murders. Lyle claimed similar abuse from ages 6 to 8. The brothers painted their mother not as an innocent victim, but as an enabler who knew about the abuse and did nothing to stop it. On the witness stand, both brothers broke down in tears. Erik's testimony was particularly compelling, as he described years of torment and fear. The defense argued that on the night of the murders, the brothers genuinely believed their parents were going to kill them to prevent the family's dark secrets from being exposed. This was not premeditated murder, Abramson argued, but imperfect self-defense. The brothers were acting out of fear for their lives. The trial was broadcast live on Court TV, making it appointment television for millions of Americans. Public opinion was sharply divided. Some saw the brothers as manipulative killers using abuse allegations to escape justice. Others believed their emotional testimony and saw them as tragic victims who had finally fought back against their abusers. But the most dramatic moment came when the jury announced their verdict, or rather, their inability to reach one. After months of testimony and days of deliberation, both juries were hung. For Erik, the vote was 6 for manslaughter, 6 for murder. For Lyle, the split was even closer. The judge declared a mistrial, and the state decided to try the brothers again. The second trial began in August 1995, but this time, the rules had changed. Judge Stanley Weisberg severely limited testimony about abuse, ruling that much of it was hearsay and inadmissible. The brothers would be tried together this time, not separately as before, and perhaps most importantly, the cameras were turned off. The circus atmosphere of the first trial was replaced by a more traditional courtroom setting. Without the compelling abuse testimony that had dominated the first trial, the prosecution's case seemed much stronger. On March 20th, 1996, after 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with guilty verdicts on 2 counts of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. On July 2nd, 1996, Lyle and Erik Menendez were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. They were 28 and 25 years old, and it appeared they would die behind bars. For nearly 3 decades, that seemed to be the end of their story. But then, everything changed. While the Menendez brothers disappeared from headlines, they were quietly building new lives behind prison walls. Separated and housed in different facilities for security reasons, both men focused on rehabilitation and helping fellow inmates. Erik Menendez, now 54, has spent decades working with disabled inmates and those struggling with mental health issues. He has participated in victim impact programs and has shown what prison officials describe as genuine remorse for his actions. Lyle, now 57, has worked extensively with prison administrators and inmate advocacy programs. He has been involved in the Men's Advisory Council and has mentored younger inmates. Both brothers married while in prison, finding love and building meaningful relationships despite their circumstances. But it was new evidence that would eventually reopen their case. In 2020, Roy Rossello, a former member of the Latin boy band Menudo, came forward with explosive allegations. He claimed that Jose Menendez had sexually assaulted him when he was a minor during his time as an executive at RCA Records. Then, a letter surfaced, written by Erik Menendez to his cousin Andy Cano in 1988, 8 months before the murders. It detailed his father's ongoing sexual abuse. This letter, which had not been available during the original trials, corroborated the abuse allegations that the defense had made decades earlier. It was physical evidence, written in Erik's own hand, that seemed to support their version of events. Armed with this new evidence, the brothers' legal team filed a petition for resentencing in May of 2023. They argued that under current California law, which takes childhood trauma and abuse into account, the brothers might receive a lesser sentence. The case gained national attention once again, particularly after the Netflix series Monsters. The Lyle and Erik Menendez story renewed public interest in the case. Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gaskin, in one of his final acts in office, recommended that the brothers be resentenced to 50 years to life. This would make them eligible for parole immediately, since they had already served more than 30 years. In May of 2025, a judge granted the resentencing request. The brothers' sentences were reduced from life without parole to 50 years to life under California's youth offender law. Because they were under 26 at the time of the murders, they became eligible for parole hearings. After 36 years behind bars, Lyle and Erik Menendez would finally have their chance at freedom. The question was, would they get it? August 21st, 2025. After decades of waiting, Erik Menendez faced a California parole board in his first hearing since his conviction. The hearing lasted nearly 10 hours, conducted remotely due to security concerns. More than a dozen family members spoke on Erik's behalf, describing his transformation in prison and his commitment to helping others. His wife, Tammy, spoke passionately about the man she had married, not the frightened 21-year-old who had committed murder 36 years earlier. Erik himself spoke at length about his crimes, his rehabilitation, and his deep remorse. He described the murders as the worst day of his life, not just because of what he had done, but because of the pain he had caused his family and community. But the parole board was not convinced. Commissioner Robert Barton delivered the devastating news. Erik Menendez was denied parole. The reason? His conduct in prison. Barton cited a pattern of disciplinary violations that showed, in his words, a lack of self-awareness. Erik had been caught using illegal cell phones multiple times, had been involved in fights, had used drugs, and had even participated in a tax fraud scheme linked to a prison gang. Your institutional misconduct showed a lack of self-awareness, Barton told Erik during the hearing. Initially, you felt connecting with the outside world meant more than the consequences of getting caught with a phone. Erik acknowledged his mistakes, explaining that he had initially felt that connecting with family and the outside world was more important than following prison rules. But he insisted he had learned from these experiences and had changed his behavior. It wasn't enough. The following day, August 22nd, Lyle Menendez faced his own parole board hearing. The outcome was the same, but for slightly different reasons. Commissioner Julie Garland acknowledged Lyle's genuine remorse and his work as what she called a model inmate. She recognized his potential for change and his positive contributions to prison life. But she was troubled by what she described as persistent antisocial personality traits like deception, minimization, and rule-breaking that lurked beneath Lyle's positive surface. Like his brother, Lyle had repeatedly violated prison rules by using illegal cell phones. He had admitted to a cell phone violation as recently as March 2025, just months before his parole hearing. Deputy District Attorney Ethan Milius, representing Los Angeles County, argued against parole for both brothers. He questioned whether Lyle had genuinely taken accountability for his actions, noting his long history of lies and deception dating back to his college years. Someone who is unable to follow basic rules while in a highly structured setting, Milius argued, raises concerns about their ability to follow rules in society. Both brothers had tried to explain their cell phone use. They claimed they needed privacy for family communications, particularly after sensitive conversations on approved tablets had been leaked to tabloids. But the parole board saw this as just another excuse, another example of the brothers believing rules didn't apply to them. The denial was particularly painful because both hearings had generated such hope. Family members had traveled from across the country to support the brothers. The new evidence of abuse seemed to validate their original claims. after decades of model behavior in many areas of prison life. It seemed like their moment had finally come. Instead, both brothers were told they could apply for parole again in 3 years, though they might be eligible for an administrative review in as little as 18 months. After 36 years behind bars, they would have to wait even longer. The denial of parole for both Menendez brothers marks another chapter in one of America's most enduring true crime sagas. But their story is far from over. The parole board's decision is not final. Under California law, Governor Gavin Newsom has the power to review and even reverse parole decisions for murder cases. The brothers have an active clemency application pending with his office, and Newsom has up to 120 days to conduct an internal review before making his decision. Meanwhile, their legal team continues to pursue other avenues. They are still seeking a new trial based on the newly discovered evidence, including Roy Russello's allegations and Erik's letter to his cousin. They argue that this evidence, had it been available during the original trials, might have resulted in different verdicts. The brothers' case has also benefited from changing attitudes toward childhood sexual abuse and trauma. What was once dismissed or minimized is now better understood by both the legal system and society at large. But the parole denials also highlight a fundamental tension in the American justice system. Should prisoners be judged primarily on their original crimes or on their behavior and rehabilitation while incarcerated? The Menendez brothers committed brutal murders. There's no dispute about that. But they also endured horrific abuse as children, abuse that has been increasingly corroborated by new evidence and changing understanding of trauma. Their prison records show both remarkable rehabilitation and troubling rule violations. They have helped countless fellow inmates, but they have also repeatedly broken institutional rules. They are now middle-aged men who have spent more of their lives in prison than in freedom. They have shown remorse, built meaningful relationships, and contributed to their prison communities. But they have also demonstrated that they still struggle to follow rules, even in the structured environment of incarceration. The question that has haunted this case for 36 years remains: are Lyle and Erik Menendez cold-blooded killers who deserve to die in prison, or are they victims of horrific abuse who acted out of desperation and fear? Perhaps the answer, as with so many questions in criminal justice, is not entirely black and white. What is clear is that their fight for freedom continues, whether through the governor's clemency process, a new trial, or another parole hearing in 3 years. The Menendez brothers remain determined to prove they deserve a second chance. The case that captivated America in the 1990s continues to evolve in the 2020s, and the final chapter has yet to be written. For more deep dives into the stories behind the headlines, remember to like this video, comment below with your thoughts, and subscribe to True Crime Stories so you never miss a case. We'll be here waiting.